friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Katie, and this is Life Between Words. You'll have to excuse me. I have come down with some sort of chest cold, so I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, and my throat hurts. I feel like I constantly have to cough. It's not the most pleasant to talk, so you're just going to have to bear with me. I'm in a different location today because unfortunately I couldn't find my tripod, and also I usually sit right over there in front of my bookcase, but as you can see we have this big Christmas tree. So I'm just going to sit in front of the Christmas tree and be all festive. Let's talk about the books I read in November. I finished 5 books. Technically I just finished 4 books. One of the books I'm really close to being done with, but I didn't quite make it. Let's talk about Harry Potter. I started rereading Harry Potter. I'm going to scoot over just a little bit so that the book can be in the frame. I started rereading Harry Potter, oh my goodness, I think in 2016, and I didn't finish it. My goal for this year was to complete my reread of Harry Potter, and I am really cutting it close. I loved this reread. Obviously, the 6th book is incredibly sad, and I won't say why because I don't want to spoil it. But in fact, I just need to tell you a little story. While I tell this little story with a huge spoiler about book 6, I'm going to hold up my hand. When I take my hand down, you all can unmute or come back or whatever. I'm going to say the spoiler now. Now. Ready? Okay. If you're still here, you know that at the end of the 6th book, Snape kills Dumbledore. Dumbledore dies. In my neighborhood a few years ago, I was going on a walk with my family, and plastered to the side of a car was a bumper sticker, or more like the kind of sign that you'd see on a business car, and it said, Snape kills Dumbledore, so that as the car is driving around, he's just constantly advertising the biggest spoiler in the series. How trollish is that? Just a little story about the 6th Harry Potter and a huge spoiler I came across in my neighborhood. Thankfully, it had been a really long time since the 6th Harry Potter book had come out, so most people probably wouldn't be spoiled. The only thing that I really have to say about the 6th Harry Potter book, because let's get back to the wrap-up, right? I was really annoyed with Ron and Hermione for the majority of the book for not giving any credence to Harry's theories. They're always such a tight-knit threesome, and they're always exploring these theories together, and I feel like they kind of just left Harry out in the cold to figure things out on his own. And it really made me a little bit sad. So that's the one thing I have to say about Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Next, I've reread one of my all-time favorite books, and that is Peace Like a River. I reread this with a few of my friends who were reading it for the first time, and it was such a lovely, amazing experience to read this book with other people. The insights into the book and the characters and some of the quotes that struck me differently because I was able to hear them from their perspectives. I thought about opening this up for a read-along for all of my subscribers because I talk about this book so often, but the reason that I didn't is because Krista from Books and Jams has chosen Peace Like a River as her December book club pick. I can't remember the name of the book club, but I will link it down below. It's a Goodreads book club, so if you want to join in with her and a bunch of other people who I'm sure will be reading this in December, I would strongly urge you to. This continues to be one of my favorites, and it's a perfect read for December because it's filled with all of the kinds of things you expect. Hope and faith and family and miracles. It's a perfect kind of read for the Advent season. It feels to me a little bit like a Western and a lot like a great American novel. It has this feeling to me almost of a book like To Kill a Mockingbird. In fact, Swede, who is Reuben's sister in the book, Reuben is the character from which we're hearing the story. Swede is Reuben's little sister, and Swede reminds me so much of Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird. They are cut from the same cloth. It's slow moving without being boring, tragic without being distressing, and sweet without being saccharine. It holds itself in this kind of amazing tension, and the writing is simply gorgeous. It's not a Christian book. It's not published by a Christian publisher. I wouldn't say that it's like beating you over the head and trying to convert you or anything, but the main characters, especially Jeremiah Land, Reuben's father, have a deep and profound Christian faith, and that's kind of at the heart of the story. If you're uncomfortable reading about characters like that, this might not be the book for you, but if you don't mind that, whether or not you're a Christian, then this book is completely worth it in my opinion, and I just absolutely love it so much. Between the writing and the characters and the storytelling, it is by far the most beautiful book that I have ever read, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Next, I finally picked up the 4th book in the Louise Penny series, A Rule Against Murder. It's one of my all-time favorite series. I just think it's so wonderful. It just has this perfect blend to me of cozy and heartwarming, but also delving into the human psyche, and I especially love the character of Armand Gamache. I'm not sure you can read this series and not love him. I was watching an interview with Louise Penny when her most recent book came out. I think it was on a morning talk show. She was talking about her inspiration for Armand Gamache, and she was saying that when she was first writing the books, she was thinking about the characters, and she kind of had a direction that she wanted to go, and then she changed her mind. She was going to write Gamache as sort of your stereotypical, hardened, tortured detective who has a lot in his life to work out. And then she decided, you know what? No, if this book takes off, and it did, although at the time she didn't know it, then she didn't want to spend her time with a character that she disliked. She wanted to spend her time with a character that she loved. And so she decided to write Gamache as the kind of man that she would marry. He is a wonderful character, such a good man with such a good heart. I think it's so refreshing that in a genre so full of main characters, detectives who are tortured, we have Armand Gamache, who isn't good at his job because he's coming from a place of turmoil, but he's good at his job because he's coming from a place of wisdom and compassion. The writing is beautiful, the characters, especially the characters that we get to know over the course of the series, are deep and reflective, and the settings are so evocative. This book takes place during the summer at a lodge in the woods in Montreal, and so it's hot and sticky and buggy, and you can feel it. My one complaint about this book is this. While I didn't guess the killer, which I really appreciated, I did think that the explanation for the why and the how of the murder was kind of far-fetched. How many things had to fall into place for the killer to murder in exactly the way that he did? Does that make sense? I'm not going to say anymore. But despite that complaint, I still loved the book. I can't wait to keep going with the series. I'm pretty sure the next book, and I can't remember the name of it right now, was my dad's favorite. My dad started reading this book this summer, and he is now way further along in the series than I am. He's eating them up like they're candy. The next book I read was A Mother's Reckoning by Sue Klebold. Sue Klebold is the mother of Dylan Klebold, who was one of the killers in Columbine. So I read this book for Nonfiction November. I really wanted to pick up a couple nonfiction books, and I started like 4 nonfiction books and only finished this one and then almost finished another one. But I did complete this one, and I'm really, really glad that I picked it up. This is gonna definitely date me. If you guys want to do the math, you can probably figure out exactly how old I am by what I'm about to tell you. But I was a freshman in high school when Columbine happened. I remember exactly where I was when I heard. I didn't hear until I came home from school. I remember going downstairs and my mom was folding laundry and watching TV. She had the news coverage of Columbine. All we heard for weeks after the event was about Columbine. There was so much misinformation. There were so many rumors that weren't true, but it's what we heard, and what you hear in the first hours after a tragedy like this are what stick in your head. So a lot of that misinformation was what I believed for a really long time. It was so ridiculous, I even remember going to school and being afraid of the kids who were wearing trench coats. That's how crazy it was. And there was so much blame being put on the parents of the 2 killers. So much blame. At the time, I was a student, so I was looking at the tragedy from a completely different perspective then as I do now, because now I'm looking ahead to when I'm going to have school-aged children myself. And so my perspective has completely shifted. So reading this book was amazingly profound because I was given insight to the parent of one of the killers. My heart breaks and grieves for Sue Klebold and her husband Tom, although they're no longer together, because can you imagine the kind of strain that this would put on a marriage? I can't even imagine it. My heart breaks for the victims' parents as well and their families, but because this book was about Sue, my focus was on her and her experience. Her experience in so many ways was so lonely because she lost a child the same day as all of these other parents lost children, but they died at the hands of her child. And so while she sort of has this kinship with these other parents because they all lost children, she's very alone because her child was a murderer. The weight that that puts on my heart is just, it's so heavy. One of the quotes that really stuck out to me in this book was towards the end, and I'm just going to read it to you. If I had thought there was something seriously wrong with Dylan, I would have moved mountains to fix it. If I had known about Eric's website or the guns, or about Dylan's depression, I would have parented differently. As it was, I parented the best way I knew to parent the child I knew, not the one he had become without my knowledge. What you learn in this book is that she really didn't have any idea what Dylan was struggling with. And she also wasn't a bad parent. She was incredibly involved. She responded to every situation just like you'd imagine any parent would respond to any situation. One of the really interesting things that I learned in this book is that, and it makes a lot of sense, at every age depression manifests itself differently. So depression looks really different in children than it does in adults, and it looks really different in teenagers than it does in adults, but probably a little more overlap. But when you're a teenager, some of the symptoms of depression that you often see are symptoms that are also just kind of symptoms of being a teenager, like sleeping long hours, being sullen, being irritable, being moody. I mean, those things are things that we see in teenagers all the time. They're kind of just what you expect a teenager to be like, at least a little bit. And so when she saw those things in Dylan, she didn't write them off, but she didn't see them as red flags. And I feel like most parents would be the same. Now Sue has to live for the rest of her life beating herself up because she didn't catch on to those signs. And that's my one complaint about this book. She's remorseful to the point of flagellation throughout this book. I found it a little bit repetitive, the amount of times that she said things like, "What could I have done differently?" or "I couldn't understand how he could do this." It just got a little bit old to me. And yet, I feel like those thoughts are completely understandable. I totally get why she would just go over those things again and again and again and again in her head, because what parent wouldn't? She has also spent the last 15 years of her life devoted to suicide awareness and suicide prevention so that other parents who might have a suicidal child won't miss the signs. And of course, depression doesn't mean that you're going to become aggressive or that you're going to murder anyone. That only happens in a very, 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 very tiny little subset of depression. So don't take that from what I'm saying, but she has spent her life devoting herself to that as sort of a recompense for what Dylan has done, and as such, all the proceeds from this book go towards suicide prevention. And that says a lot for the fact that this book was not written for the purpose of profiting off of tragedy. I don't think anyone reading this could feel that Sue is anything other than a thoughtful, loving, kind person who is incredibly remorseful and sorry for what her son did. But she's also not her son. And I think that a lot of people, especially at the time, blamed her for what her child did. And yet, after all this, she of course still loves her son. She just finds what he did reprehensible. And I have to say that as a parent, I would love my boys too, as hard as that is to say and as hard as it is to imagine. How, as a mother, can you reconcile your love for your child with some horrible, catastrophic act that they perpetrated? I don't know, and Sue is going to have to live with that tension for the rest of her life. I highly recommend it, especially if Columbine touched your life like it touched mine, if that makes sense. I'm really interested to read the book by Dave Cullen called Columbine as well, but I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break because this was pretty heavy. If you want to hear more of my thoughts about this book, I already feel like I've gone on and I've kind of touched on a lot of stuff, but you can read my Goodreads review. I will link it below. Finally, I have about 2 chapters left of a parenting book called Easy to Love, Difficult to Discipline, and it's really interesting to read a parenting book right alongside a mother talking about how she parented her child who grew up to be a killer, and she was a good mother. This is the best parenting book I've ever read. It gives me the most practical tips, the most useful helps. There's been some parenting books that I've read that just don't mesh with my own brand of parenting, and this book encapsulates the kind of parent that I want to be and what I can strive for. And with any good parenting book, kind of the main thesis is you need to fix yourself before you try and correct your kids, because you need to model the kind of behavior that you want to see from your kids. If you want your kids to be patient and kind, you need to be patient and kind. They use this method in a lot of schools with kids that have a lot of behavioral issues and are really troubled, and it's been very effective. So this is a book with a lot of research behind it. I have highlighted so much in this book. I am going to refer to it and already have referred back to past chapters to help me when conflict arises. If you're looking for a good parenting book, look no further. Alright, those were all the books that I read in November. I read more than I thought that I did, and I'm really pleased with how November went. I hope that everyone is having a great day. I hope that everyone is having a great start to the season if you celebrate Christmas too. And if you don't, I hope you're just having a wonderful December. That's all for now. I will talk to you later. Bye! Also, I meant to say that people have been asking me to do another Advent series, and I'm kind of struggling with how to change it up so that it's not just the same as it was last year. Do you want more book recommendations based around the themes of Advent? There are other themes other than the ones that I did last year. But if there's another way that you can envision an Advent series, let me know, because I've been really racking my brain and it's been kind of a struggle. So I want to please you. I just don't want to do the same thing as I did last year. So let me know if you have any ideas for that, and I will try and accommodate. Okay, so I have to say, okay, whoa, just hit myself in the face.